Hello, I am a girl named Nikki who plays Infinity Nikki, and I'm here to talk to you about Infinity Nikki. The point of this video is to summarize and analyze what we experienced in chapters 1 through 2 of the main story. I'll be sharing my personal thoughts alongside going over all the information that we learned. Whether you're here for a story refresher or because you just like to listen to me yap about characters, get comfy and grab some snacks, or put me on in the background as I break down these chapters. This is going to be broken up in 4 parts. So lore overview, character log, florawish, and my thoughts. The lore overview will be a look at the fundamental aspects of Mirrorland and its world building. The character section will include my first impressions of the characters we met in these chapters and any knowledge we have of them thus far in the story, so no spoilers past chapter 2, okay? Florawish is a look at the main location where these chapters take place and any context from the history of the place and or the people that we can gather. And finally, we will wrap up with my thoughts on the narrative as a whole. I am a literature major in college, so I have a personal interest in the art of storycraft. So I will be adding my 2 cents on how I thought the story was handled from a more critical lens, while also speculating on the possible events of the next chapter. I've timestamped everything below if you want to jump around, so feel free to listen to whatever part you would like, or be a real one and settle in for the whole thing. Since these are the very first establishing chapters of the story, I'm going to touch on the key concepts of Mirrorland that were introduced to us. First, though, I'm going to briefly summarize the actual events of the story, so what happened in chapters 1 and 2, and then we will dive into the lore a bit more deeply. We start off in Nikki's mother's house, or we can assume that's the case, and specifically, our 2 main characters are in the attic. Momo comments that they were never allowed up here when they were growing up in the house, so we're kind of left wondering why this was and why Nikki and Momo are able to enter the attic now of all times. We have to assume that like their mother let them up, or I don't know. Nikki gets swept away by a mystical dress that Momo finds in a closet, and they get thrust into this strange world. Guided by a mysterious voice, Nikki navigates a barren, desolate palace, learning to harness a power called whim and use her mother's ability outfits that Momo had packed into her bag. She learns to purify these strange creatures and eventually comes upon a sealed, ginormous tower. Using the power of her dress, Nikki unlocks the huge wooden doors and pushes her way into what looks like a prison. Descending from her chains in the middle of the room is a woman in all white, and she calls herself Enna the Curator. She comments on Nikki's dress, calling it the threads of reunion, and says she used to dance with its owner. Enna also remarks that Nikki chose now, of all times, to step onto the stage, though what she means by this, we really aren't sure, and by Nikki's expression, she didn't know either. Enna then proceeds to extract what she calls the heart of infinity from her own chest, and then thrusts it into Nikki's. Enna warns Nikki that despite the power this will grant her, she will lose something in return. From the disappearing dresses, we can only assume it's a big trade-off. She instructs Nikki to revive all of the miracle outfits and save Mirrorland, hinting that we may uncover a truth that even the gods could not. Without another word, Nikki is sent away and wakes up in the ruins of the Stylists Guild Memorial. It's here she meets a stylist named Dada, who invites her to meet up in Florawish, and Nikki makes her way through the open world to reconnect with her. After being inaugurated into the guild as an official stylist, Nikki encounters a man named Giovanni. Nikki is drawn to his paper cranes and humble demeanor, spending some time chatting with him about her circumstances and his thoughts on the nature of wishes. She learns that he's a stylist who sells wish flight paper and is beloved by the townsfolk. He gives her some of his wish flight paper and sends her to make a wish at the Great Wish Tree. This is where Nikki wishes for guidance on her quest to find these mysterious miracle outfits. After this, Nikki encounters a young lady named Nonoy, who is the intern keeper of the Dream Warehouse. Nikki gets sucked into this huge investigation on a series of coma incidents that have recently swept across town. Joining forces with our new friend Nonoy, both girls follow the trail of someone called the Wish Envoy, who is part of the Quick Wish bottle scheme. They learn that not only are these bottles sending people into comas, right, targeting the most vulnerable and desperate of townsfolk, but that the perpetrators behind this scam are part of something much more sinister. Giroda, a Fey-wish sprite and a friend of Nonoy, joins the team and is determined to help find out the truth behind these Quick Wish bottles. After fixing the town's electrical problems following an earthquake, Nikki meets back up with Nonoy, who opens up about her relationship with her mother and why she's so troubled by her mother's sudden coma. More clues lead the girls to make the chilling discovery that Nikki has been watched ever since she arrived in town. The Kingdom Guards captured one of the perpetrators, and Nikki is called in to interrogate this prisoner. Donning an official uniform, Nikki questions the captured scammer, who lets slip that the Prophet is the head of this whole operation. The Prophet is the one who has been watching Nikki's every move and is intrigued by her pursuit of him. Nikki successfully learns that the Prophet kept a ledger that contains a remedy for the comas and a list of all the victims, so obviously she wants to go get this. She manages to get out of the prisoner where this ledger is, and while finding this ledger, Nikki rescues a PC, which is a being born of the clothing that's been soaked with strong wishes. And this PC is named Fluffy Walt's Dada Bear, which is fantastic. This encounter is short, but the PC offers to return the favor if Nikki should ever need it. Once Nikki returns to Nonoy with the ledger, both girls head for the Dream Warehouse where Nonoy's mother's Quick Wish bottle is being kept. In the warehouse, though, the girls and Giroda encounter resistance from some Fey-wish sprite paladins, and these are different looking sprites than any of the other sprites we've seen so far, who attempt to take the Quick Wish bottle by force. Nikki and Nonoy team up, and by working together, they are able to take back the bottle and manage to escape. Back in Nonoy's home, she reads her mother's wish from the Quick Wish bottle, but discovers that her mother's name is not on the ledger, despite being in a coma. Nonoy shows Nikki, Momo, and Giroda her music box that was found in her crib as a baby. She was adopted, and the song that plays bestows Nikki a vision of a mysterious hooded man singing mournfully in a meadow of golden yellow flowers. This gives Nikki inspiration for the first piece of the miracle outfit, which Nikki reveals is called the Wishful Arosa. It's then that Nikki heads for Stoneville to continue her investigation. So, that summarizes the story thus far, but let's go ahead and break down some key elements of the world itself. Let's start with the concept of stylists. This is how people in this world wield the power of whim that lets them accomplish incredible feats a normal person could not. The most powerful of stylists can even control time and space, which is honestly insane to think about, but this just means that this power has so much range. The ability outfits are harnessing the power of whim, and it's the means in which everyone in Mirrorland creates a means of living. So this includes outfits that can help them build cities or invent whim tech that can provide daily comforts, and also they can enchant objects for people's benefit. The duty of a stylist, according to the Florawish's Stylist Guild, is to provide for and protect the community, but I have a feeling that this won't be the same in every nation we go to, and learning how each nation or region views its stylists will tell us a lot about the values of those cultures and societies. So that's really exciting to think about. According to the rules of the Guild and Florawish, though, stylists are expected to follow a strict code of honor and be a force of good in the community. They are also authorized to intervene or even police individuals using whim or ability outfits outside of regulation. The importance of how these ability outfits are used by people and how integral they are to civilization in general in this world makes Nikki's quest to find these miracle outfits feel all the more weighted. It also highlights the power of the heart of infinity that is currently within Nikki, and how this force is not only guiding her towards the outfits, but gives Nikki the power to wear or use these outfits to begin with. Multiple times through the chapters, Nikki winces in pain or expresses concern over the heart of infinity. The idea that it physically hurts her is concerning, to say the least, but it's interesting that there seems to be a physical cost on Nikki's body whenever it acts up or is called upon. This was done mainly by wishing, and this leads me into another major concept of Mirrorland. Wishing is a fundamental pillar of Wishfield's culture, but especially Florawish. There is a noticeable reverence and blind faith that people have in this deity they call the Wishing One, where wishes aren't just abstract hopes, but actual requests that can be fulfilled. To what extent the wishes are carried out, I'm not sure yet, but this is such a fun concept. This ideology is baked into every aspect of Florawish's culture, and we will talk more about that in the Florawish section, but it sets the stage for how dire and messed up the quick wish bottle comas are. The power of wishes, or the act of wishing, I'm sure will be further contextualized as we continue in the story, but I feel that these two chapters did a great job emphasizing how important this aspect of the lore is. One last thing I wanted to quickly mention before moving on to the characters is the presence of Cadence-borns. These seem to be dragon-like creatures that have accompanied stylists throughout the ages, recording their stories and feeding off of inspiration. Literally. Cadence-borns are tied to the Dew of Inspiration collectibles that Nikki can purify throughout the open world. I haven't encountered any thus far, but we did get a name mentioned in the Stylists Guild called Kylo, who helped Dada and Bebe put together the Wishfield Outfit Compendium, and has apparently been around for a long time, as generations of Florawish families have stories about Kylo. So I'm sure we'll meet him, but I haven't come across him just yet. We also saw a Cadence-born in the Battle Pass cinematic, and in the murals on the walls in the memorial at the very beginning of the game too. So I have a feeling that these creatures be interesting to see how they come into play, but as of right now, we don't know very much. This is the part of the video where I will give my first impressions and overall opinions on the characters. I will mostly be going chronologically in the order we met them. And this includes Nikki herself, and I will add my speculations about how I think their arcs will manifest in the story going forward. Let's start with Nikki and Momo. She's our main character. She's our POV character. We are experiencing Mirrorland through her and with her, alongside her, you could say. I love how they've depicted Nikki in the story so far. I like that she doesn't feel too juvenile or young. Like, she has an element of maturity to her, and at certain points too, like when Nonoy is saying, "Oh, let me wear a pink wig and see if I can, take over for you because I don't want you getting involved because I feel guilty. You're not from here, but this is a Florawish issue with the quick wish bottles." And Nikki's like, "You know what? I'm a very talented stylist. Like, I can take care of myself." And it was less about ego and more so she's like, "I can look after myself." And I just really like that there's this self-awareness, the self-acknowledgement that she's not narcissistic by any means, but she does have faith in her own ability. And I just like that. I think it's a small little detail, but it tells us a lot about how she views herself and how she approaches problems, because she is always ready to step right into things. And it's not recklessness, you know, she doesn't throw herself into these problems because she's not thought things through, but she does have this sense of, I can look after myself. These people need my help. I have the ability to help them. Why would I not help them? And that's just such a wonderful quality, right? That's such a lovely quality to have in a person. Pretty typical in, you know, protagonists, but it's a nice little aspect of her character. She also has this incredible optimism. Like, it's not to the point where she blinds herself to the seriousness of situations, like with Nonoy, and when Nonoy opened up about her mother, or when we were going up against the Florawish sprite paladins in the Dream Warehouse. Her optimism didn't blind her or make her overly confident in situations where caution was required, but she is always the person who is there to uplift other people, right? She does this with Nonoy the entire time we interact with her. She does this even with Giroda, and she hasn't known Giroda that long. I mean, she hasn't known any of these characters that long, but that innate instinct to uplift others is really nice. I really love that about Nikki as well. There's this very beautiful humility to her that I think is what makes her, at her core, a very relatable character, because she doesn't think too highly of herself, but she also can look after herself. She's not overly optimistic or overly confident, but she isn't about to let people around her get too down. Or normally it's when Nonoy was expressing a lot of self-doubt, Nikki was there to step in and say, hey, you know, like, yes, the situation's bad, and I understand, I recognize your feelings, and I think that they're valid, but you don't have to be this hard on yourself. And I don't know. It speaks to a lot of emotional maturity, which harkens back to what I was saying, that she doesn't feel juvenile or like a kid or a child. She feels very much like she has at least seen some of the world. I don't know how old Nikki is, and I checked the wiki just to be thorough, and it doesn't list her age. And I think this is on purpose. I think it's to make Nikki more relatable, because there's, of course, a wide range of people who play the game, all different ages. So I think it's supposed to help Nikki feel more, you know, closer to the player. Not necessarily a stand-in, because Nikki definitely is her own character. And while you can select dialogue options, both options are still within Nikki's personality. You're not picking different personality responses. Both responses are both things Nikki would say. So it's still a very established character. It's not a stand-in. It's not a self-insert protagonist like they have in some games. Nikki is very much her own character. And I just like that there is this level of ambiguity to her age, but they still give her a lot of emotional maturity and frankness in how she talks to other people. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this at the very end in my overall thoughts on the narrative, but there is a authenticity to how Nikki interacts with characters. Like, she talks to people like real people. Like, these are real conversations real people would have in the real world, right? Obviously, Florawish and magic and floating dresses don't exist, but the way in which Nikki interacts with the NPCs and major secondary characters feels very realistic. You know, it's very immersive because she's having genuine exchanges with these people. And I think that also just reflects on Nikki herself and who she is, and that she's a sincere person, that despite whatever she encounters, you can always trust her to be utterly sincere. And it's another very endearing quality of Nikki. Infold did a fantastic job writing her and making her someone that I can immediately love and root for, but also get very much invested in her journey. And I want to see her succeed. I care about her. I care about if she's going to have, you know, if she's going to falter or have obstacles in her path, which she will, or we wouldn't have a story, right? I want to see her overcome those, and I want to see her do well, and I don't want anything bad to happen to her. Of course, this is slightly subjective. Everybody has their own opinions, and everyone has their own levels of, you know, how much they care about the characters in the game. Some people don't really get emotionally attached, and that's totally fine. I am I am someone who gets very emotionally attached to the characters in games or movies or books or whatever. So I'm very much attached to Nikki already, and I'm very much excited to see what else is in store for her, because this frankness, this self-awareness, and emotional maturity I see in her writing thus far gives me hope that there's a possibility of a bunch of different kinds of stories to be told, and Nikki will navigate those stories with a lot of emotional impact, and it'll be rewarding as the player and, you know, consumer of the story, not just the game play itself, but as the, you know, as the story goes on, it'll be satisfying. We'll get emotional satisfaction from following her on her journey. So I really like Nikki. I think she's a fantastic protagonist, not just because she has my name, but I also just, I love her, and I cannot wait to see where she goes. Momo, I'm not really sure how Momo exists. I don't know, like, cause he was alive and talking all the way back in their mother's house in their world. So I guess that's normal there. I don't know. There's a lot of questions about like what her original world was like, or if it was like our world at all, or if it's another, because I know the Nikki universe, there's like lots of different timelines and stuff. So I'm curious. I know they said that there's no direct connection between Infinity Nikki and the other Nikki games, but it'll be, I'm sure there's going to be Easter eggs or references, right? And I'm just curious about where they came from, like where their home is, and what life is like there, if Momo is normal, or if Momo's not normal, I don't know. But I actually really like Momo. I think he is very charming and not aggravating. Because sometimes with a game I'm not going to mention, sometimes you have characters that are like the little companion, that are supposed to be the little, you know, humor, the comical relief. Sometimes it lands, sometimes it really doesn't land. But with Momo, I think they got it right. I think they got it right with Momo. He's not intrusive. He feels very much like he cares about Nikki, and vice versa. Nikki always was asking like, can Momo come with me? And Momo's like, I'm not going anywhere without Nikki. Like, I like that there is time taken in the narrative to establish their bond, and that they genuinely seem to care about each other, and they banter with each other, and there's a genuine relationship there to follow along. And I'm sure it'll not be like a main focus, like a main relationship dynamic, but it's something that'll be constant, obviously, because Momo goes wherever Nikki goes, right? And I just think it's sweet that they have this bond, and that Nikki kind of, I think, also relies on Momo to gain a sense of normalcy, because she's in this strange world and all of these things are new, and she's dealing with all these situations and dangers and stuff, but she has Momo with her. And I think that that is what is going to be a security blanket, for lack of a better term. And I think Momo is very sweet, and he's funny. Like, I was actually genuinely laughing at some of the things he was saying. Like, he's just really well written, just like Nikki is, and I appreciate his presence instead of just tolerating it, if that makes sense. I like Momo, and I like that he follows us around. It's really cute. Okay, let's go ahead and quickly chat about Enna. I say quickly because we don't really have a lot to go on, but I can't not mention her because she seems to be a pivotal figure in the greater scheme of the plot. So I'm sure we'll see her again at some point. How soon, I'm not sure, but I love this character in terms of its like the aesthetics. A plus. A plus. I don't know if she's a villain or not. I do think it's interesting that she immediately mentioned that, oh, I used to dance with its owner, and we can assume that the threads of reunion was Nikki's mother's dress, considering they were in her mother's home and they were never allowed up in the attic when they were younger. So I assume it's her mother, and so her mother might have gone to Mirrorland at some point. Not sure, but Enna is definitely a major lore character. And like I said, we'll probably see her again. Not sure how soon, but I cannot wait to learn more about her. The Heart of Infinity, she said it's a gift from Ina the curator, that she's gifting us this. And she also makes a comment, a warm and courageous heart, the perfect host. And if you look at her face, like she has this kind of almost bittersweet or forlorn kind of pained expression when she says that, and she's got her chin hooked over Nikki's shoulder, and she has this expression where Nikki's like not looking at her face, and it's just, I don't know, it's like small and it could be nothing, but I think it's interesting to take note of the details because this game provides them. So if the game is giving me small details, I'm gonna make note of them. And I just noticed that little exchange. So not only do we have a possibility that Enna is connected to Nikki's mom or her family in general, we're not sure, but Enna seemed to be also like kept there for a while, and she said, oh, now you choose now to step onto the stage. Like Nikki didn't just happen to waltz into her mom's attic. I'm sure maybe we'll learn more about how that happened, but it seemed like very much not on purpose that Nikki was thrust into Mirrorland. So maybe it was fate, who knows? Maybe fate is like an actual force of nature in this world, like wishes are, you know, maybe it's part of how the world functions, one of the mechanisms, the great universal mechanisms of the universe. So can't wait to learn more about her, but don't have anything else to say really, other than I can't wait to see more of her, and whether she's a villain or a good guy or something in between, I'm ready. Dada and Bebe, I'm just gonna group them together. We technically met Bebe after, you know, a little later, but I think these two sisters are really cute. I like that their names are kind of like both very sweet, and that they have kind of very opposite personalities. One's super outgoing and then the other one is a little more like introverted, but they both have this very tender kindness to them. Dada is very encouraging to people, will go out of her way to encourage someone, even if, you know, it feels like it's going a little overboard. I still like that she's very dedicated in recruiting stylists, which also plays into the greater mechanism of, you know, Florawish's culture and like how they view stylists. Stylists are given a lot of privilege in the society. It says a lot about Dada that she's not like egotistical about it, or she's not like, oh yes, we're stylists. Like she doesn't seem very exclusive, you know, where she looks down on others for not being a stylist or what kind of stylists there are. She seems very welcoming, you know, and very open to sharing the ins and outs of how to be a stylist, and she's very dedicated to inaugurating Nikki into the guild. And of course she's, you know, a little bit of like a tutorial character. She's supposed to help, she gives you the parapal and she's, you know, walking you through this, but I still think, you know, within her place in the story, I still like that she's very kind and welcoming despite having a lot of social status, being a stylist and being the head of the stylist guild. Bebe, on the other hand, like I said, she's a little more introverted, but I think she's really sweet. We don't know very much about her. We did have that one interaction with her. She gives us the camera, which is part of like her ability outfit, I think is what they said, which is interesting. But she seems to be a little more reserved, but kind of like the opposite side of the same coin when it comes to Dada. Bebe was not as forthcoming with her compliments, but she is just as sincere when she does give them. So I think the two sisters are really sweet. I'm sure we'll see them much more going forward. Okay, now we get to the good stuff. Giovanni, my Gino. I love him. Giovanni is a really wonderful character. But I'm gonna be serious, okay? Let me just get this out of my system so I can move on and actually talk about his character. I think he's very handsome and I ship him and Nikki already. I don't care what happens in the rest of the story. I don't know what happens, but he's my forever only one. Love you very much, my Gino. Okay, now that it's out of my system, the simping has been simped. Let's talk about him as a character from a more analytical lens. I think that there is going to be more to him that meets the eye. This was made pretty obvious by the way he's portrayed. There's like a lot of mystery to him. He also isn't telling us everything. Of course, we had just met him, so you don't really tell someone you just met all of your life secrets or your past secrets. But there definitely is things he definitely left unsaid. And the way he talked about the nature of wishes and how sorrow and hardship is also a part of life, and that means that it's also a part of wishes in general, and that wishes not only encapsulate happy things or, you know, innocence, but they also hold and bear the weight, the burden of darker emotions, darker thoughts, and the darker aspects of human nature. Of course, he didn't say it with that much bluntness, but he was very poetic and lyrical in his wording, but that was the vibe I was getting, and that he's saying there's like always another side to things, and sincerity is always the key. So I thought it was pretty profound what he said. But this also it got my lit major bells tingling, and I could be like, okay, yeah, they're setting something up with him. If you go talk to him after, like outside of that initial cutscene where they meet, he does talk a little bit. He kind of starts to ramble about his past family prestige, and then he kind of cuts himself off and is like, I don't really want to talk about this. I find that interesting. I don't know if that was on purpose. Like, I don't know how clever or like manipulative, if he is those things, or if it was just like a sincere slip of the tongue and he was just upset by his own past and he realized he was sharing too much. He was oversharing, who knows? But I think it's interesting, this prestigious past that he has. Very curious about that. We know that there's, you know, a greater monarchy, royalty. I don't know if he's royalty. That's not what I didn't immediately assume that, but there is a social hierarchy is what I mean to say, and that he's talking about prestige. So maybe his family used to be prestigious, or because he said past, so I assume that means not anymore. This could mean that his whole family's dead. I mean, we don't know, but it does give him a sense of loneliness, isolation, and that's kind of assuming a lot about him just from a very few very few words, not a lot of information. But what is this channel if not overanalyzing our faves, right? So can't wait to see more from him in the future. I really liked his dynamic with Nikki. Aside from the fact that I shipped them, there's a little something there, and you don't have to interpret it as romantic. I'm not saying that's what it means specifically. I'm interpreting it as that, but I think there is a connection there. I do also think it's interesting to note that his paper crane, when flew over to her at the very beginning of their interaction, it seemed to pain her a little bit, the Heart of Infinity specifically. And this is another instance of the Heart of Infinity causing Nikki pain, which very concerning. But it's only ever happened in like very specific situations, and I just think it's interesting that this is one of those situations. I don't know if it's because Nikki was saying, because when he walked up to her, she was saying like, that story was so beautiful, why do I feel this pain? And he says, oh, you're so empathetic. I don't know. I just think it's interesting and something to know going forward, because I don't know. I don't know if that's foreshadowing something or what, but they were definitely setting up something with Giovanni, and I cannot wait to see where that goes. For my own personal happiness, but also I think within the story, he will most likely be a reoccurring character, right? That's definitely what I got. That's the sense I got. And I cannot wait to see him again and learn more about his past. One last thing before I move on, I also want to mention we did find a little bit of information about his last name, Chiquetto, in the, I think it was the Daisy Inn. We were reading the little bit of lore, and I came across this person's little diary or journal. And there was a little part in the journal where he said, oh, I was new in town and I came across this Mr. Chiquetto and he gave me wishfly paper. It doesn't name Giovanni, but Giovanni said, oh, I gift wishfly paper to every new person in town. And that sounds like him. And this guy was saying I was in Florawish for the first time. And I just think that it's interesting that we got a last name. Also interesting, Giovanni introduced himself with his last name to this guy, but he went with his first name when introducing himself to us. I don't know if that's because it's like that the guy who wrote the journal was like an older man. It could be something to note, could be not, who knows, but we did get a last name. We did get a last name, so we will keep that in our memory bank. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Nonoy. I like this character. I like her design. I think her little red hair with the blue accents and the paper cranes is super cute. I think it's sweet, her friendship with Nikki. There is a sincerity to it that's really touching. And I think when Nonoy opens up about her fears regarding her mother and how she feels guilty because she was trying to look into her past because she's adopted, and her mother was like deeply adamant against her trying to figure that out, and that caused this rift, and then her mother fell into a coma, and Nonoy is at first carries a lot of guilt because she thinks it's her fault. I think the way she opens up to Nikki, I don't know, there was just something so sweet about it and touching how they bonded and how Nikki was there for Nonoy when she needed it. It says a lot about Nonoy too, that when we first meet her and she crash lands her paper crane into Marquez's store, she doesn't immediately say or use her personal pain or what she's going through as an excuse. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because Marcus is like, you should have told me. Like, I wouldn't have made you go all through this. I didn't know your mother was in a coma. Like, obviously he would have been a lot softer and immediately told her to to go to the guild and try to figure out what's going on. But it says a lot about Nonoy, and like that she tends to prioritize others' problems over her own and will try to conceal what is bothering her so it's more convenient for others, or I guess so others don't know. Of course, that's a very humble trait. I think Nikki helped Nonoy realize that you can't bury your problems like that, especially if you need help. I think one of the most beautiful things Nikki has said so far in the story is she just simply asks Nonoy, like, do you need a little help? Maybe some people brushed over it, but I thought it was just such a beautiful, simple thing to ask, like, do you need a little help? Because Nonoy clearly was overwhelmed, but she wasn't asking for assistance, and Nikki was in a place to provide that, and Nonoy like almost broke down when she accepted that help. And I don't know, I just find that relatable, because I personally struggle to ask for help. Even if I'm super overwhelmed or I'm like seconds away from a breakdown, I will not open my damn mouth and ask for help. It's just like ingrained in me not to do that. And so to see that quality reflected in Nonoy is, I don't know, it's just relatable. And it was cathartic to see her open up and accept help and let Nikki join forces with her to fix the problem. And I don't know, I really like that. So I have a personal attachment to Nonoy because of that similarity, and it was just cathartic to see her, bond with Nikki. But I think the way Nonoy is written was also very sincere. Again, I'll talk more about the quality of the writing in the last section of this video, but they really nailed this authenticity, this quality in these characters and how these characters interact. They talk like real people. They have conversations like real people do. Even though, like, for example, Giovanni was very lyrical, poetic in how he spoke, he still came across as like a person, and he spoke to Nikki like a person. Same with Nonoy. Like, she has her own issues and she seems to be very scattered and she was overwhelmed, but when she opened up, she still spoke to Nikki. The emotional exchanges with her and Nikki were so real. They felt so genuine. And I don't know, it's just, I think it's just so touching, and it allowed me to invest more in Nonoy as a character and get more emotionally attached, because I could not only relate to her, her situation, not her mother being in a coma, but the struggling to ask for help and needing help and, being afraid of asking for reassurance or support. That is, of course, something I initially grew attached to in her character, but the way in which she speaks with Nikki just, I don't know, it just hammered it home. I really like Nonoy, and her little face off with Nikki against the paladins was so fun. So hype, so cute. It was very much Pixar anime mesh of action, but like it worked once she opened up the the music box. I think it's very interesting that was in her crib when she was a baby. She did say when she was first opening up to Nikki, she was saying like, I want to know where I'm from and like who I am and what I am. And I thought the what I am, it was like odd phrasing, and I didn't know if that was like a translation error, but considering she was found with this like mysterious music box that happens to have the wishing one in it that happened to trigger the Heart of Infinity in Nikki's chest and give her inspiration for the Arosa outfit, I wouldn't say it's a coincidence fully. There must be something special about Nonoy, and since she's not a biological daughter, I don't know, there's got to be something there, right? So I'm excited to learn more about that. We are, it seems, moving away from florawish at the moment, but I'm sure we'll come back to Nonoy at some point. Giroda is another character that I think we are going to come back to a lot sooner than Nonoy, because Giroda said that he will be sneaking his way into Stoneville with us, not by our side, but he will meet us there somehow. I didn't know what to think of Giroda initially, but I thought it was cute that he was friends with Nonoy, and his little pack is really sweet. I also noticed that his cape has like little stitches in it, so he comes across a little rough around the edges compared to like the other sprites that we've seen, and he seems isolated from them in a way, and we find out why when we confront the paladins, and the paladins treat him so horribly. Like, the main paladin was super mean to Nonoy, but they like violently shoved Giroda, and then they said, "Do you want to be locked up again?" Which, okay, what the fuck does that mean? And then they called him the son of a traitor. So there seems to be way more to the sprite culture than I was initially assuming, because I just thought, oh, they're just gonna be like little fairies, and I didn't know how much autonomy they had, or like how developed their like society was. But holy shit, from those lines alone, it doesn't reflect only on Giroda as a character, but also like what to expect from the other fairies. Like, that seems pretty harsh. What do you mean they locked Giroda up? Giroda didn't come across as evil or mean or a scoundrel, like someone to not trust. He was Nonoy's friend. Nonoy trusted him, and he's been trying to help us this whole time. He's a little clumsy and he doesn't always know what he's doing, but his heart's in the right place. He has a good heart, and that came across very clearly. So whatever happened with the Feywish sprites, I don't know, it doesn't reflect well on the paladins, because we know Giroda pretty well once we get to the confrontation. And Giroda's been nothing but desperate to help, and sweet and kind, and wanting to do good, and he wants to become a knight. Like, how cute is that? But he was treated like shit by these paladins, so I'm a little concerned. I'm a little concerned what we're gonna find when we move further into the story and we confront more of these paladins. Are all the Feywish sprites like this, or is it just, are the paladins like a faction within the sprites? Like, I have so many questions, and I'm so excited to have those answered as we move forward in the story. I don't know if we're gonna get those answers immediately in Stoneville specifically, because it seems that the sprites aren't welcome there. The PCs are, that's like their territory or something, and that the sprites are like looked down on in Stoneville specifically. I don't know if that's, I don't know what that's about. That's fascinating though. I'm interested to learn the different cultures and social norms of these different towns, and it's exciting to me that Stoneville is going to have a completely different, or I assume it's going to have a completely different feel than Florawish. Not just visually, like within the landscape, I'm sure, but like the actual people, the townsfolk, like what they value is going to be different. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited to figure out what that is. Fluffy Waltz Dodo Bear, which is a insane name, is a PC. The first PC we meet, she will grant us, you know, a favor in return for saving her, and she tells us to meet her by the Meadows Support Center or something. So that's where we're headed next. But it's interesting to me that PCs are wishes manifested into a being, because PCs are made of clothes that are soaked in strong wishes, whatever that means. I don't know if there's a process to that, how PCs are born, how often they're born, what kind of wishes, or what the soaking process is. Like, I'm not sure how that all works, but I'm interested to find out. It seems this animosity, or at least difference between the sprites and the PCs, I don't know if it's the actual sprites and PCs that don't like each other specifically, or if it's Stoneville and Florawish and their ideologies that have influenced these creatures. I'm not sure where it originates, if that makes sense. Giroda seems to be pretty neutral about it. He did say, oh, they don't like sprites there, but he didn't like seem to show disgust because, like, oh, they don't like they don't like sprites, so they suck. Like, he didn't come across that way. It was actually Nonoy who was like, you know, don't trust PCs. Like, she was the one spouting the I don't know if it was propaganda, because I don't know how true it is, but it's probably, I'm sure she didn't mean any harm by it. Like, I don't think she was mean spirited. I think it's just what she was taught or what she knows, right? Because I assume she stays in Florawish. She was raised there, right? So I don't know if it's the actual creatures that are at odds or if it's Florawish and Stoneville, but either way, I'm very interested to head into Stoneville and see what we have in store for us. With that though, let's go ahead and move on to the Florawish section. So one of the main things I wanted to cover right off the bat is the culture of inclusion that Florawish has. And I think this is one of the defining traits aside from the PCs thing, which is like the only exception I've found so far. But there's this culture of inclusion where not only do the stylists very much take it upon themselves to try and better the community and give to the community, right? And the community in turn relies on them to provide for them and will provide for the stylists in their own ways, like Marquez's shop with the clothing materials and stuff like that. Like, it seems to be very synergistic, right? So not only is it the inclusion present within the actual community, but in the Kingdom Guard's office, we read a little bit and we found out that this Empire of Light, which is another nation that borders the Heartcraft Kingdom and Wishfield, as you know, the kingdom as a whole, the Empire of Light is at odds with another nation called Umbraso, and because of the Empire of Light's infiltration of that country, the Heartcraft Kingdom, and Florawish specifically, is taking in Umbraso exiles. And in the Kingdom Guard like codes, and this is not verbatim, but they were saying you must not shame Umbraso exiles for their, like, you know, religious beliefs, their cultural beliefs, you know, try to get the stylists, the Umbraso exile stylists to sign up with the guild. So they're trying to include them into their guild. They also said, like, don't try and bring up the different methods of wishing when it comes to Stoneville residents. So there is this, and that's in the Kingdom Guard's like code. So that's something that the guards enforce not only within their own ranks, but also, I assume, other people, that there is this not only natural culture of inclusion within Florawish, but also an enforced one. And it seems like it's coming from a good place. Like, it didn't come across as oppressive to me, but it is something to take note. And this was also present in Sachia Academy. And when we were reading a little bit about stuff there, that there is this dedication to inclusion, not just stylists or Umbraso exiles, but everyone at the academy was supposed to be respectful of each other and to be open-minded and to not engage in any kind of oppression or shameful activities that would negatively affect someone else who's maybe not from Florawish. And I think that's really cool, and just it says a lot about the values of this place. We also got a little bit of a look at how the people of Florawish value their stylists, and we were reading a little bit. We read an interview. This was also at Sachia Academy, I believe. We were reading an interview about a royal stylist who was making clothing and was known for their clothing that, you know, that people now associate with like royal style, because the stylist was, you know, the pleats. I think it was called pleats, royal pleats or something. And I just think it's such a small detail, and it's not like detrimental to the overall story, but it fleshes out the world so much because it puts into perspective real concepts of, you know, fashion and what makes something not only fashionable but desirable within, you know, a consumer population. And since outfits are like the bread and butter of Mirrorland, it makes sense that style and fashion isn't just, you know, you can't just wave it away as a hobby or something that only a certain demographic or bracket of people can really engage in or afford. Fashion is their life. It's their life means. It's how these ability outfits, you know, it's not just about how it looks or what message the fashion conveys, like in our world, but it also does stuff. the ability outfits do things, you know, they have power. And so I just think it's really interesting to kind of think about how fashion is not only representative of a message or a class of people, but it also can mean so much more than that. And that when people design, when stylists design outfits, they're putting their whole experience or emotion or motivation into these pieces of clothing. And I don't know. I think it's really cool. And florawish is super, super on top of that. They really like to uplift this creative process and are adamant about keeping it inclusive and that no creativity should be shunned, essentially, not just because of where you come from, but within the creative process, you should have free reign, and that's your right as a stylist. And I don't know, I just think that's really cool, and it says a lot about florawish. I also would like to know more about the Dream Warehouse and this partnership that the humans have with the sprites, specifically around the warehouse, because there seems to be a lot of reverence for the wishing one in florawish that has blinded them to some extent that some of the more vulnerable members of their society are so easily tricked into this quick wash bottle scam. They saw, you know, when Giroda was, you know, pretending to be the wish envoy, the whole crowd immediately believed that this was authentic because it was a sprite. So they have this innate trust in the sprites, and maybe that's deserved. I don't know. We don't know much about the history of things, but from the paladins, like, I don't think that all of the sprites are good, right? Or all of them have earned that trust from the people. So I think it's going to be interesting going forward to see how that dynamic shifts or maybe changes, depending on what happens. But I'm really curious about this partnership. We learned how it started in the Dream Warehouse. We did read a little bit of lore about, you know, the initial partnership that the wishing one established, that the human keeper and the sprites will work together to, you know, record and manifest all of Florawish's or Wishfield's wishes. And it's a pretty important job, sounds like. So we learned how it started, not much about the context of why that is, but we do know how it started. And I'm just curious to learn how that dynamic has maybe been taken advantage of by certain parties or just left to not rot, but the mysticism of it all has kind of grown over the generations, and people know less and less about the real nitty gritty of how the wishes actually work, or, you know, the process of, I don't know, manifesting them. Like, I'm not sure how the wish making works. Like, we saw the sprites when we were in the warehouse with the cranes and the bottle, the little sparkling orb, and some of the sprites flew off with these orbs. So I don't know what they're doing with those wishes. Like, I don't know what the magic system is. I'm sure we'll learn about that, but I don't know. I'm very intrigued. And obviously this being in Florawish is a fundamental aspect of Florawish's reverence for wishes and the wishing one and sprites in general. I also want to make a quick comment about Arosa versus Silvergale. These are these two deities, or I assume they're deities, right? And with Nikki saying, oh, it's the wishful Arosa is the name of the miracle outfit, and she named it that after seeing the blonde hooded man in the flower field. I want to assume that his divine name is Arosa or something, or the Arosa encapsulates him. The Silvergale, though, which is mentioned only a couple times, we were reading too about Stoneville, I think they call it the Silvergale. I don't know if it's the same deity or if it's a different one. It was in the Kingdom Guard's office and they mentioned the Silvergale, so I'm not sure. When we were talking about like the inclusion and to not like shame other residents for having different wishing practices and calling, you know, different deities, so they mentioned the Silvergale as one of them. So I'm not sure if it's the same, like if the wishing one is both, and it's just like these two societies have different ideas of the same god, or if it's two different gods. So I'm sure that will also be answered later, but it's something I wanted to mention because it seemed like a pretty fundamental difference or identifier between Florawish's culture and like other cultures, so I needed to mention it. This section is going to be a little more open-ended, so I'm not going to have a strict targeted topic that I talk about, But it's mostly just overall thoughts on the narrative, more critical analysis of the narrative and the writing, and also just speculation about Mirrorland and where I think the story is going. I think the writing has been handled really well. And I think not everything is perfect, but I think what matters most, which are the small moments, like the moment on the crane. There's no writing, there's no dialogue in that sequence, but the writing and the direction of the devs saying, okay, when they get on the crane, the music's going to start to play and we have them fly through this beautiful landscape. That was part of the writing. It was part of the experience that they crafted. And I think that moment, and also the dialogue, the emotional exchanges, they absolutely nail. And I think it's not so like, oh, you could take these emotional exchanges like Nikki talking with the Nonoy or Giovanni or, you know, even Giroda, like taking these conversations and saying, oh, you could, just because it's good writing, you could put it in like out of context and it would still hold up as like stellar example of writing. I think what makes the writing good and the dialogue good in the game is that it understands what it is, what the game is, and what experience the players are most likely to want from it. And they are happy to craft moments of immersion, of quietness, and of emotional exchanges between the different characters that play in to those payoffs, if you will. I think the dialogue specifically is well done. Dialogue can be really hard in any media. Dialogue can be very tricky because getting characters to communicate in a way that's not telling the audience exactly what they're feeling verbatim, like to treat the dialogue with a sense of realism, is difficult. And especially in games that are a little more whimsical, like Nvidia Nikki, like these aren't conversations you would see in Game of Thrones, right? They're completely different, but they are good in the context of their game because they serve the game's purpose. They serve the experience. And that's what I think I most appreciate about it, that they have managed this balance between whimsy and kind of some lightheartedness and giggling and fun, with also being able to touch upon real emotional, more heavy topics in a way that doesn't feel out like tone deaf or out of place. Because I think what really holds everything together in the narrative, like not just the dialogue, but everything, is there's this sincerity that like oozes from this game. And maybe this is bias. I think I'm being pretty objective here. Obviously, you don't have to buy into the experience if it's not tailored for you, or you just don't like this kind of gameplay, or whatever it is that you don't like about the game. Could be what people do like about it. And I think Nvidia Nikki offers players a very tailored experience. And it's not niche because there is this sincerity that pulls anyone in. You know, like even if you're the total opposite of Nikki in every single way, sincerity can still endear you to her, you know? It can endear you to the other characters. I don't know. It makes not only the immersion better, but it also enhances the script. It enhances the narrative of the story. And I think that there is something special about that. And it's hard to do. And like I said, I don't think it's perfect. I'm not, of course, the utmost expert in the whole world, but I think from my experience and from what I've learned in school and stuff, that so far they've done a fantastic job of connecting the player, not just with Nikki, but the world. You want to explore. You want to go to that castle in the distance. You want to remember the crane ride. You know, they are crafting these narrative experiences that make you feel personally attached to locations or visuals or characters in the game. And that's how you get people. That's how you immerse them. That's how you pull them in, is that you find ways to give emotional payoffs that are earned, right? That are earned as much as you can in a way that feels authentic and organic within the story. So really like the narrative so far. Can't get enough of it. I cannot wait to get into Stoneville and see how different it is. If it's that different, if it's the same. I want to see how deep the world building goes, because world building to me is so important, and consistency within the world is what helps immersion, right? You get immersed because you believe what you're seeing and experiencing. And you believe it because the characters believe it. And if the characters believe it, it must be true. So then you can invest. But when things stop being consistent, when the characters aren't recognizing things they should, or there's, you know, kind of gaps in the lore, or things that make you sit back and go, huh, that didn't make sense. You know, that's when you start to lose immersion. And for me, that starts to be a deal breaker when it comes to stories, because immersion and losing myself in the world and getting attached to characters is what I personally enjoy. So obviously that's not the same for everyone, but I'm saying for me and how I like to consume media, this game is giving me everything I want. Everything I want. And I hope, sincerely hope, that it's giving you a similar experience. Even if you're not as in love with the game as I am, I hope still it's offered you something that left you with a smile or uplifted your mood even a little bit. And I think if it's done that, then it's done its job. I know the game obviously is made by developers and they want to ultimately make money, right? We're not going to pretend that's not a thing, but I think that the game is successful in connecting its players with its characters, with its world, and immersing you. And that the world building is such a huge part of that. And there's been so much dedication to fleshing out the world and the culture and the difference between each city, like not just nations, right? Each city has different culture, like subcultures. And that's so realistic because that's how real life is, right? Like even cities that are right next to each other, right? And there's only like 5 minutes of driving or transportation between them, can have such different feels depending on the local population and what's valued by them. And I just like that they seem to nail that in this game, and that it's not only there, but it's explored in the game. And yes, a lot of it that we discovered, at least personally for me, at least thus far, has been read. So I read this lore that fleshed out the game, but even if you don't read, I think it's still present, and that characters will verbally explain and or state things like, oh, they don't like sprites over there. So there's still obvious obvious world building in the actual story and cutscenes and dialogue exchanges. It's not just in the written lore, but if you care enough about it, the written lore really enhances your understanding of how deep this world building goes. And I'm obsessed with that. I am obsessed with that and so grateful. And I hope they continue this dedication to immersion and world building going forward, because I think it really serves to keep people coming back to your world, coming back with Nikki, wanting to explore more and see more of the game and see more outfits and learn more about these characters and meet new characters. Again, for me, that's what keeps me coming back, and people like me who invest so heavily. But anyway, I think that this game so far is wonderful. I love the design of the environment and the design of the exploration and how the environments get you to explore and entice you to explore. The mini games are fun. The narrative is fun. The dresses are fun. Everything is fun. And I am so happy to dive headfirst, not only into the story, but also into the world, the exploration. I'm ready. So I hope you are too. You probably wouldn't be listening this far if you weren't. But one last thing I wanted to mention before we close out into the outro is the controversial queen that was mentioned, Queen Philomia. Very interested to learn more about her. I don't think she's still the queen. I don't actually know who is in charge right now of the Heartcraft Kingdom. We don't have a lot of information on that, and Nikki hasn't really asked. We have the kingdom guards, so there's clearly still like some sort of monarchy or a monarchy equivalent kind of government system going on for the greater Heartcraft Kingdom. So that's not just Florawish or Stoneville or Wishfield, that's like the whole kingdom. We don't know who is in charge currently. I'm sure we'll learn about that, but I also am curious to know what this controversial queen, like why was she controversial? What did she do? What happened? Was she at fault? Was she evil? Was she not? Did the people turn on her? Did someone else turn on her? Like, what's happened? I want to know what her influence and legacy is, and if that legacy is still present with the current ruler, whoever that is, or if it's dissipated. It's still, Queen Philomea is still clearly spoken about by the people. So if the people still have local legends and influences in their styling, you know that she was huge and that people still know about her. I don't know how long ago she was queen, so I would love to know more about that, but I just think it's interesting that she was mentioned and she was controversial, and I'm just curious to see how her legacy has manifested itself within the world building going forward. I don't know if we're going to hear anything about her in Stoneville, but I would love to I would love to know. So keeping an eye open to hear more about this controversial queen, and maybe any information we have on the current ruler or rulers of the Heartcraft Kingdom. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. If you did, as always, I very much appreciate you spending your time with me, especially this one. I know it's a lot different than my original character log format. Normally, I just talk about the characters and a little bit about the lore and move on, but I'm so invested in this game. I couldn't not make this like a whole other thing. I also have another series for Nvidia Nikki that I'll be releasing that's a more intimate breakdown of each area in Wishfield. So like Florawish and Stoneville. I'm obviously, this outro is me currently talking. All of what you just heard was pre-recorded at the time I filmed chapters 1 and 2. So that was like a few weeks ago. So this is current Nikki talking, and I have finished the 1.0 story, and 1.1 just dropped with a new quests. Keep an eye out for that. All my socials are going to be down in the description. If you would like to, we do have a channel Discord. We're very chill over there. So if you want to come say hi, feel free. If you don't want to interact, but you just want to get notifications, that's fine too. No pressure to chat if you don't want to. I do stream every week on Twitch, or at least I try to. So if you would like to get notified for that, Discord is the place for that. I really hope you enjoyed. I wrote a whole script for this. I really went hard on this whole thing, so I hope you liked it. Filming all the B-roll footage for this, where I was getting all the atmospheric shots, was like so fun because I love taking pictures in this game, and this game is so freaking beautiful. So this whole process was like just a fun, creative, I was just having the time of my life. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. And if I don't see you live, then I will see you in the next one.